Hello and welcome back to my channel. I am Colleen Delaney and I am in a new room and the light here is amazing. Is this going to be my new filming spot? Maybe. It's a super stormy day. I'm only in here because my kids are home and they're being so loud and it's so bright. So today I am going to talk about some wonderful fall reads, and I have some witchy books for you. I have some mystery books for you, some literary fiction, some romance, some classics, and then sprinkled throughout that I have dark academia because some of them I have put in mystery and some of them I have put in lit fic. So let's get started and let's begin with witchy books. I think the most out of all of them is witchy books because I love witchy books. I'm a big witchy books person. So the first one is one that I've been talking about a lot and will continue to talk about a lot because I loved it and read it 2 weeks ago for the first time, and I really can't wait to read the rest of the series, and that is Wolf Gone Wild by Juliette Cross. This is October, November, New Orleans, witches, werewolves, curses, fall fests that are super spooky. It's a really fun and funny witch book. There's a group of sisters, so you get that sort of like Charmed vibe. There's lots of fun magic. It's a really fun witchy romance. This is a romance. This is an explicit romance. Don't go into this thinking that I didn't tell you that. Explicit romance. It's wonderful. Next, I have the Ex Hex, which is actually my book of the month pick this month, and I finished it this morning. And similarly to Wolf Gone Wild, it is another like family story, but this time we've got a sister, a cousin, and an aunt. It is Georgia in the mountains in a very witchy town. Our main character, Vivi, 9 years ago had this like hot fling with a Welsh warlock who was visiting, and when they broke up terribly, she kind of put a fake curse on him, and then fast forward 9 years and it turns out the curse is real, and now horrible things are happening to her town. It's very rom-com. So if you are thinking of a witchy book where there's like some dire straits, this isn't really the book for you. This is like a rom-com witchy read. So funnily, like a lot of the reviews were saying like, oh, it's like a witch book, but it's so spicy. And that was obviously coming from people who don't really read romance, because I would place this at about a medium heat level. The door is open and you get the gist of what's going on, but it's not extremely explicit about what's actually going on. I still wouldn't necessarily give it to like a teenager who you don't want reading like sex scenes, but it's not like, this isn't gonna, if you're a romance reader, this is not gonna be the hottest book you read all year. All right, my next witch read I don't have because I read this probably like 8 years ago via the library is Practical Magic. Now, I will say, I love the movie Practical Magic. It's probably my favorite movie to watch in the fall. The book is very different. If you're looking for a book similar to the movie Practical Magic, I would recommend the last two books I talked about, Wolf Gone Wild and the Ex Hex, probably the Ex Hex the most. The book is much more like magical realism. It's a lot more like, is this magic? Is it not magic? It's got a cool feel. Alice Hoffman is one of my favorite authors, but oddly, it's not because of the Owens series, because she's also got The Rules of Magic and Magic Lessons, and I know there's a new one that just came out. I read The Rules of Magic. I listened to it on audio. That's the one about the ants. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. And I didn't love it. I might have also not loved it because I listened to it on audio while I was getting a root canal to try and distract me. So I was a little out of it and not in like a great place. So that might be part of why I didn't love it. I do remember feeling that book was like super fallish. If you aren't getting a root canal, I'd recommend picking that one up. Magic Lessons about Maria Owens, I actually got the galley of from NetGalley, the ARC, like the advanced reader's copy, and I didn't finish it. I read probably the first 100 or so pages, but I just really couldn't get into it. I don't know, I felt like it was missing a little bit of like the magic of practical magic, or even like the rules of magic. But practical magic is really just like, if you like witch books, you kind of, I feel like, have to read practical magic. It's sort of like if you tell someone you're obsessed with like American literature, you like have to read The Great Gatsby. So give it a try. It's a fun book. It's all the fall vibes. You'll enjoy it. Okay, so the next witch book I'm going to talk about is a series again. It's called The Witches of Port Townsend, and the first book is called Which Witch is Which? And it's got 4 authors, one of whom is Kerrigan Byrne, who I really enjoy. And the other authors, I'm looking at my computer because I don't remember, are Cynthia St. Aubin, Cindy Stark, and Tiffinie Helmer. And I really enjoyed this book. I've only read the first one in the series, but I'll definitely finish it. So it's 4 sisters, and they've been raised separately under weird circumstances. And they each have a different element. One's water, one's air, one's earth, one's fire. And it's got this sort of like 4 horsemen of the apocalypse theme also, where each one is destined to be one of the horsemen. The first book is really like the beginning, jumping off. Like, I read it before the rest of the books had come out, and I remember thinking I should have waited till they were all out, because it definitely ends on a cliffhanger, and I think it would be better to read them all as one. So I will probably this winter read them all together. But if you're looking for like a fun witchy vibes book, it's definitely open door, definitely explicit, pretty hot. Also kind of like, there's got some like gross magic in it, which I love a good gross magic. I like, you know, witches who like cut out the hearts of animals under the full moon and bathe in their blood. I like a gross witch. I can't help it. I like a gross witch. Okay, my last witchy recommendation is a book I actually haven't read yet, but I am reading this month. It's on my TBR, and it is Everyone Knows Your Mother is a Witch by Rivka Galchen. This one I talked about in my October TBR, and it is kind of like written almost like a primary account of a witch trial in Germany in the 1600s. I will let you know in my October wrap-ups what I thought of it, because I'm actually doing really well in my TBR so far, so I will definitely get to this book, which I wanted to. I feel like if you want to read something that's like a little bit more like historical fiction feeling, but with witches, this is the way to go. I assume there's not going to be magic in it, that it's going to be more like a realistic tale of what the witch trials were like, so it'll probably get pretty dark. Okay, so next let's do mysteries. Okay, so the first mystery I'm going to talk about, I just finished, and I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down, and it is The Maidens by Michaelides. No one knows how to pronounce it. This book was really good. If you're looking for a dark academia book, this also is very much dark academia. It's, you know, Cambridge, it's cobblestones, it's professors, it's studying ancient Greek. One of my really good friends is a ancient Greek professor, and I want her to read it and tell me if she would come up with the same translations that they do in this book, because that's a big part of it. Basically, the story opens, and our narrator is Mariana, and she's in her probably like late 30s, I would guess. She's recently widowed. She's had kind of tragedy follow her entire life. Neither of her parents are living. Her sister's not living. She has a niece who goes to Cambridge, and her niece calls her and tells her that her best friend was murdered and she needs her to come to Cambridge. Mariana's a group therapist, so she has a great insight via like all her psychological training into what might be going on. She gets hyper focused on one of the professors, Edward Fosca, and believes that he must be the killer. And then you follow her through the next few weeks until you finally get to the end of the story. I really enjoyed this. The twist was extremely surprising to me. And then it was one that like after the twist happened, I was like, oh, that actually, there were some setups in the book along the way that I just missed. But I don't know if anyone would say like, oh, I totally figured this out, because if they did, I think they might be lying. It was a very good twist, and it made me want to read his other book, The Silent Patient, which I would never have picked that up, but I really enjoyed this one, The Maidens. Dark academia and mystery. Okay, so the next one, The Anatomist's Wife by Annalee Huber, technically takes place in August, but we're in Scotland, so it definitely has like a fall feel. I'm gonna read the rest of this series probably this winter, because I did really enjoy this one. So I will let you know. I assume book 2 might take place in like September, October. If that one's more appropriate for a fall book, next year. So the heroine / main character is Lady Kira Darby, and she's a widow, and she was married to an anatomist. And she is a painter, and she used to draw basically dead bodies for her husband for his medical books, but that was not allowed because it's the 1830s. She is staying with her sister at her estate in Scotland, and sort of just drudging through life at this point when a very gruesome murder happens at the estate during like one of those old school parties where like people came and stayed for a week. So Lady Kira and Sebastian Gage decide to try to solve the crime together. I enjoyed it. It was a fun historical mystery. If you want to read like, you know, a book that's early 1800s, but it's a mystery, I really liked it. So that's The Anatomist, The Anatomist's Wife by Annalee Huber. The next mystery I'm going to talk about, I don't have a hard copy of. I know I did at some point, but I lend these books out all the time and I rarely get them back. And it is Arcadia Falls by Carol Goodman. So Carol Goodman, I'm surprised she's not more popular right now because there's this huge surgence of dark academia books, and the majority of her books have dark academia themes. There's like one or two that don't. But she used to teach at a boarding school, I think, like Latin, so she has great life experience for it. All of her books are great for people who like dark academia mysteries. I would definitely recommend her as an author. But this one in particular is like the fallish, the most fallish. Some of them take place during the summer and some take place during the winter. But this one's definitely a fall one. So we open with our heroine, Meg, who is a recent widow and there's like no money. And she has a teenage daughter whose name is Sally, and they are moving to upstate New York where Meg got a job teaching at a boarding school. No one's happy about the move, and when they get there, the house they're moving into is like super creepy and falling apart, and they feel like it's a bad sign. It is a bad sign because right after school starts, one of Meg's students falls into a gorge and dies, and it's, was she murdered? Did she commit suicide? It's one of those stories. Everything Carol Goodman writes is extremely atmospheric, and you'll definitely feel thrown into the story. I would also really recommend her book of The Lake of Dead Languages. If you are interested in dark academia, that is a very good story that bounces between present and past of a woman who is teaching at a boarding school she went to, and kind of the bad things that happened when she was a student, and then the bad things that are happening now. I absolutely love Carol Goodman. She's my favorite mystery writer, and she is described as a literary thriller writer. So you walk away from her book usually learning something, which I enjoy too. Next, let's move on to romance. So the first book is Bittersweet, and it's #1 in the True North series. And it's like Vermont, apple orchards. The setting is a farm where the hero makes cider, like hard cider. So it's very much like the fall vibes because of that. We have our hero Griff, who is a farmer, our heroine Audrey, who is like a restaurateur, I guess, but she's kind of an apprentice, and she is trying to find new drinks for restaurants in Boston. They had a fling in college. She shows up and she's like, oh my God, it's that guy from college. The fling was fantastic, but it was very short-lived, and they sort of set back up again. This isn't a super high angst story, but I really enjoyed it. It's fun. It's a contemporary. You've got a hot guy in flannels. I mean, what else could you want for an October romance? Okay, the next series isn't necessarily like a fall series, but it feels very fall to me. Again, I read this in like February, but loved it. It's the Highland Magic series by Kerrigan Byrne. These are extremely short novellas. I feel like they're like each like 80 pages, and they follow a family of berserkers, which if you are familiar with, a berserker is like a Norse Scandinavian myth of these men that used to just go into like battle frenzies. And it's about them finding their soulmates. It's hot, it's kind of dark, it's very like broody and rainy Scotland, and I just really loved it. I read these at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was like the perfect escape out of reality. So the Highland Magic series by Kerrigan Byrne, again, they're super short. If you really want to read something that's like 80 pages long one night before you go to bed and have a complete story read, that's when you go. That's a good one for it. Okay, and the last romance I have to talk about, because I would be a terrible author if I didn't, is the one I wrote. It's called Something Wicked under my pen name, Lucy Hudson. And this is a fall romance. It takes place in New England. We've got Ginger, who's a lifelong New Hampshire resident and obsessed with fall. She meets Caden, who's a recent transplant from the South, and he doesn't really like fall. And she says she's going to take him on a month worth of fall-themed dates to get him to fall in love with the season. It's a lot of food description. It is open door and explicit. It is extremely low conflict. One of my readers said this is like sitting down and drinking a hot cup of cider. So that was like a great review, and it made me feel good about myself, which is why I'm going to say that to you now. Yeah, Something Wicked. It's available on Amazon for Kindle and in print. Okay, so let's change gears completely and do literary fiction. So I only have 2 lit fit books on here. I'm sure I've read more, but these were the 2 that just like stood out to me. The first is If We Were Villains, which I read in September and talked about in my September wrap up. This is like all dark academia. There's a bit of a mystery happening. You got Oliver, who's just gotten out of prison, and the detective who put him there, kind of discussing the past and what actually happened. I really enjoyed this book. If you're into literature or you're into theater or Shakespeare, 100% recommend it. It is a very worthwhile read. Okay, so my next one is The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton, which is not necessarily like fall, but it was just a really good book to read in the fall. I read it last fall. If you've ever read Kate Morton, her books jump around a ton. She always has multiple narrators, and they usually span over 100 years, and this is no exception to that rule. So in this book, we have Edward Radcliffe, who's a past artist, and he's this like historical figure that people study. And then we have, what's her name? Elodie. Elodie is like the present time person who is researching Edward and his group of friends. There's a mystery where he was engaged to basically his muse and then she disappeared. The story is mostly about what happened to his muse. So we get multiple narrations, many years apart. There's some narration we get in between Edward and Elodie because they're like the 2 bookends of the story. This was my best book of 2020. It was fantastic. I did cry very hard at the end because it was a really sad ending, but also extremely fulfilling. So you won't be like, oh my God, I can't believe that's how that book ended. This is a very, very good book. Yeah. If you haven't read Kate Morton, her books are all really, really good. The Forgotten Garden was her first one that I read, and I read that right after it came out. And I've read almost all of her books. I have one sitting on my bookcase right now that I haven't read yet, The Distant Hours, but I will probably read it in the next couple months. My last group is classics. I don't have a ton of classics on here because like everyone knows that Dracula and Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and The Picture of Dorian Gray, those are all like fall vibes, you know, classics that everybody knows about. One of them that everybody knows about is Northanger Abbey, which I put on here because I'm going to try and read it this month. I've read every other Jane Austen, and I really want to read this one so that I can have a definitive ranking in my brain of which is my favorite, which is my least favorite, and what goes in between. So this is Catherine Morland. It's Henry Tilney. I mean, I've watched the BBC/PBS series multiple times, so I know the story really well. It's like Gothic vibes. It's got a lot of talk about Udolpho, which was, what was her name, Anne Radcliffe? I think it's Anne Radcliffe, who was one of Jane Austen's contemporaries. I'm looking forward to this. I think I'll like it. I read Persuasion a couple months ago and really liked it. So I think that this is going to be a fun one to read. I'm hoping to get to it in October. If I don't, I'll probably read it in December. And my last book and last classic is kind of a personal one. It is The Fellowship of the Ring by Tolkien. Why do I feel like this has the fall vibes? Let me explain. Okay, so first of all, my friends and I did a Tolkien book club a few years ago, a while ago, because by the end I was pregnant with my twins. So we had started it like a year before. So it was like 5 years ago probably that we started it, and we did read The Fellowship of the Ring in the fall, so it makes me think of fall. Also, I feel like the beginning of the story when you're in the Shire and when you're leaving the Shire and when you meet Tom Bombadil, which if you haven't read the book, you don't know who the heck Tom Bombadil is because they left him out of the movie and he's the favorite part. He is my most favorite part of the book, so that made me sad. But it has a very fall feeling. The world is changing, as they say in the movie also, but the world is changing, which is kind of how fall feels. So I feel like this is a good book to read in the fall because you get that feeling of the world of change. I also think The Hobbit is a good book to read in the fall, which I didn't bring it off my bookcase, but both of them have sort of like fallish vibes to me. The end of something, the beginning of something else. The Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite Tolkien, which I haven't read all of Tolkien, but I have read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and the, what's called the Unfinished Tales. I've read like half of the Unfinished Tales, not all of them. But this one is my favorite. I love The Shire. I love The Hobbits. I love Tom Bombadil. Enjoy. And those are my fall reads. I hope that something on the list sparked your interest and that you are excited to cozy up and read something wonderful. See you in my next video.